So when you have an area where there is a curb appeal throughout, I don't want to say just the top schools, but A, B schools where those areas are typically a little bit better maintained, I have found. But as you're driving through a neighborhood, if each home on that block seems to be well kept, that can actually foster a luxury rental.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB & Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 344. My guest today was born in Haiti, raised in Miami, and educated to be a doctor. But when she was faced with over $500,000 in student loans, she figured out a way to not only invest in real estate, but was also able to multiply her profits by 15 times what a traditional rental would gross. Dr. Rachel Gainsbrugh is a healthcare professional by day and a rental investor by night. She's the owner and manager of 18 luxury short-term rentals, and she was recently featured on a Netflix TV show showcasing one of her properties. Rachel, thanks for joining us today.
Brian, thank you so much for having me here today. I am so appreciative of the information that you're sharing with this community. It's such a great message of financial freedom. I love real estate, and that is my total jam. So thank you for having me.
Let's talk about you. Before we even get into the vacation rentals, tell us a little bit about your background. It sounds like you have a fascinating history. Kind of bring us up to speed on yourself, please.
I'm a little girl from Haiti, raised in Miami. And, I really was intrigued by entrepreneurship at a very early age, but, not having a lot of business acumen in my family or not having that type of role model, I was taught that faith was number one. And I still believe that in education was number two. And so went through, got higher education. Undergrad was great. It was paid for, but unfortunately, graduate school is where I accumulated all of that debt. And so fast forward years later, really grinded it out, working multiple shifts at the hospital and retail settings, just wherever I could to pick up, some extra hours to get rid of the student loans because financial literacy was not a big piece of my upbringing. We were always on a tight budget. It was, just spend less than you make. I knew that, but didn't really take it to heart because when it came to my higher education, I just went all out. But you know what? The pivotal moment for me was really when I realized that our student loans far exceeded our mortgage. And there was no way that that would have been sustainable. So we really went all in to work hard to get rid of that in a few years. And so thankfully we had what's called a larger shovel, right? We had great incomes and we were able to pay that down. And so when it came to kind of the aftermath of that, we looked around and we really didn't have much in savings. And we thought to ourselves, okay, so how do we use this newfound income with much less debt that, not much is going out from a debt perspective? How do we leverage it and utilize it to really exponentially increase our savings so that we can have college funding? We weren't really thinking about generational wealth at that time. I am now, but we just wanted to have something in the bank for the kids for college because we did not really have a plan in place. And so we quickly moved towards real estate investing because it was something we could understand. It was tangible. I can see a real property. I can touch it. I can hold it. And so we looked at all avenues, cryptocurrency, which is something that was coming up, brand new to us during, I want to say 2009, 2010. We started to see that. We're like, that's interesting, but we didn't quite understand it. And we said, okay, we can't sink our money to something we totally don't understand. but we understood real estate. And so we turned all the stones for all of the real estate strategies, really. And we landed on short-term rentals, and we haven't looked back since.
Tell us how you came upon luxury vacation short-term rentals.
The story really started with us going through that whole navigation process and that experiment of which aspect of real estate should we really go into. And being, again, a little girl from Haiti, I have a very frugal mindset. I was thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to go in, not really sure exactly what I'm doing. So I really need it to be as cost effective as possible. And, I'm going to need it to be quick. I'm going to need it to be pretty easy. Obviously, wholesaling, right? Let's do wholesaling. Lower barrier of entry. And so that's what was being sold to us. And wholesaling is fantastic. But when I kind of created, I would call it my investment thesis, I needed a few things in place. And one of which is my time freedom back, right? Or some semblance of time normalcy back. I remember, Brian, I told you a little earlier, we were working around the clock, like picking up moonlight shifts, overtime from hospital to hospital, from retail to multiple, shifts per day. And so the last thing I really was looking for when starting into, to get into real estate was positioning myself to be at another job, so to speak, right? So I'd cut back on all those hours. We were, stabilizing, getting back healthy. And so when we looked into wholesaling, we realized the time capital that you would need to invest, especially if you're not an expert yet, you don't have your resources or your teams built out, it was a lot of time capital. So we X'd that off our list. So, I'm a gal who likes pretty things. I watch a lot of HGTV. So obviously fix and flip, right? Let's do that. That should be great. And so we were provided a property from a wholesaler. And at the time, I didn't really understand what wholesaling was, but I learned quickly, okay, this is a wholesaler. And he was in New Jersey. The property was out in Alabama, and I'm in Georgia. And it was a 2.5 hour drive to go to the property. And so my husband and I, we got really excited. We saw this property. It was a cute little 2-bedroom bungalow looking situation. The sun was glimmering like right there. It was like this minty green color, kind of funky, but some great personality and just a really big yard. We thought to ourselves, wow, what a deal, because he was selling it for $16,000. What could go wrong? This place looks fantastic. So our newbie, with our little newbie hats on, we drive there. And so the closer we get to this property, the more I realize the area appears to be pretty decimated. Like it looked very familiar, like developing, like where I'm from in Miami, just really, really run down, really poor. And I was thinking to myself, okay, this looks a little bit unsafe, but let's see, because there's nothing wrong with it. You can definitely revitalize the neighborhood. So as we get closer and closer, and I'm the one, pressuring my husband, let's do this. We're going to go, let's go, let's do it. Well, we get there and the roof is caved in. There's this white caulking looking substance seeping from all of the edges of the property. It was nothing like the photograph. You could tell there's like relics, right? But it was nothing like the photograph. And I actually reached out to the wholesaler, which I thought was the realtor at the time, and said, hey, are you here? Have you been here? He's like, no, I'm in New Jersey. And I didn't put two and two together right away, but my husband's heading out to go and knock on the door. And we had been communicating with the homeowner along the way. We're 30 minutes out, 20 minutes out. Yeah, come and see it. He's about to knock on the door. Like, don't knock on the door. I was so afraid of this property. We hauled back into the car and head back home 2.5 hours later. And that was a moment of reflection for me and a pivotal point, because I realized that for my lifestyle, for the schedule that we have, for all that we're doing, raising kids. We've got 3 dogs. We were trying to create some type of semblance of balance, if there's such a thing, or normalcy, that a whole project management of a fix and flip type of path would not be a good fit for us. So instead of the we buy ugly houses, ecosystem, which I'm here for it, I said, you know what? I'm probably more of a we buy pretty houses and I'll put a little bit of lipstick on it situation than the we buy ugly houses. And so that was the drawing in the sand for me, because here's the deal. The next property we found is $299,000, still over $100,000 below market value, right in our neighborhood, very familiar with the area, needed a roof. We put one on for $10,000. So there was still equity, or there was still a good amount of margin. And then we rented that out as a luxury short-term rental. And that was our first property. So it was not $17,000. It was much more than that, but it was more within our comfort zone and it was more manageable for our lifestyle.
Help me put things in context then, Rachel. You and your husband were doing this together, and you said you were both working overtime. Is he a doctor as well?
He's a psychotherapist.
Did you both have student loans that you were trying to pay off?
Yes.
And did they total $500,000 or?
They totaled $500,000, $500,000. Yeah.
And it sounds like you were both starting to work, making decent income, so you could afford to go for the $299,000 property that's in your neighborhood. How did you make this leap to decide, okay, let's go with luxury short-term rental? How did you know that was the way to go?
So I had spent a year and a half or 2 years on my commutes back and forth to the hospital to work. It's interesting when you're commuting to a job and you're listening to hours and hours of podcasts about rental property ownership, about real estate, and you're consuming that information because you realize the sustainability, the burnout is right around the corner. And so I spent about 2 years consuming podcast content on real estate. And then I started to learn, well, how do I evaluate a market? How do I calculate what a property can project? How do I create that thesis to see, which market is going to be better than the other? How do I purchase a property that is below market value so that I can still have some equity? And how do I generate, or curate a space that will provide cash flow? And so that's really where it all started. So I utilized tools such as AirDNA and Airbnb, the native Airbnb tool, the VRBO tool, to start to compare within my market. Well, wow, this house is a short-term rental and they're renting it for $300 a night. Oh my gosh, that's that house right around the corner. That's insane. And so immediately for me, long-term rentals were a little bit more of a long game that would take to me forever. When I did the math, I said it would take forever for us to generate, the savings that we were looking for. And so that's really how we came up with short-term rentals when we made that comparison, because we prefer to buy and hold. And of course, we looked at syndication, we looked at industrial. Those were either a higher barrier of entry. And with the short-term rentals, I leveraged a second home loan, 10% down, scrape that together with paychecks and bonuses and savings. And that's really where we started. So for many, it's a high barrier of entry. But if you can figure out how to do a 10% down, figure out where you have some of your hidden cash, that's really how we started.
How did you go about turning it into a luxury Airbnb or vacation rental as opposed to just a typical Airbnb?
I wanted to be able to demand a higher price point for my property than just a standard rental, right? And so with a standard rental, you want it to make sure it's clean. You make sure that your guest has access. But with luxury, there's definitely some levers you can pull to up the ante. Okay. So luxury, especially modern luxury, is going to be different from traditional luxury, because traditional luxury is where you have the accumulation of things, the gold-plated this, gold-plated that. But modern luxury is really the accumulation of experiences. The guest wants an authentic, unique experience. It's curating a space where guests can connect with one another, whether it's their family, where guests can connect with nature, creating an experience that is very convenient. A luxury traveler wants convenience. So easy check-in with, the code, their entry code is the last 4 digits of their phone number. The guest communication is there. We respond promptly. So those are some of the aspects of modern luxury. So again, it doesn't have to be, all the bells and whistles. Yes, our properties do provide bells and whistles, but can you respond to the guest need, the guest that you're looking to serve? So if I know that I'm serving execs who will be looking for private chefs, well, I'll partner with the small business private chefs in the area. If I know that the guests are going to be looking for an opportunity to do a photo shoot, I'll partner with photographers in the area, provide recommendations for top restaurants, different, cultural events that are happening in the area, musical events that are happening in there, providing that communication, almost like a 5-star concierge, understanding what the purpose of the visit is. Some are there for leisure, some are there for business, some are there to visit family, some are there for weddings, and some are there for funerals. So it's a wide variety, but asking the guests, why are you staying with us here today? We want to make sure we take great care of you. And then you provide a little something for them, whether it's flowers, a bottle of wine, snacks, those types of things. Definitely go into a modern luxury stay. But if you want to get very granular, we have a king size bed in all of our properties, at least one, and the more, the merrier. So we do specialize in larger homes. So we like to add in 3 or 4 king size beds, because king size bed is the default luxury travel bed. Linens are natural fiber linens, cotton, 100% cotton, or another natural fiber like bamboo, linen. And so those are some of the things. Anything that touches the guest skin is going to be, nice, soft, high quality, fluffy towels. So we're looking at really addressing all 5 senses when we are curating the spaces that we curate for our guests.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com.
If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. With that first home that you bought that you paid $299,000 for, what was special about that home in location or size that made it appropriate for luxury short-term rental?
So looking from the outside and going in, and I remember I explained a little bit earlier with the property that I traveled to Alabama to see, there was not anything that I could do to that property to make it a luxury property. Okay. And the opposite is true for most areas. So when you have an area where there is a curb appeal throughout, there has to be curb appeal throughout. I don't want to say just the top schools, but A, B schools where those areas are typically a little bit better maintained, I have found. But as you're driving through a neighborhood, if each home on that block seems to be well kept, that can actually foster a luxury rental. So when I was explaining about the property in Alabama, as well as, my upbringing, if I'm going to visit my mom and dad, they're still in my childhood home, and I'm driving through You have neighbors sitting out on the lawn or in the front of the street with their lawn chair, and they're coming out to see, well, who's driving into the neighborhood. They're a little bit nosy and interested, and cars are zooming in and out. Like, it looks sketchy. It looks scary, but it's where I grew up. They know me. I know them, and I feel pretty safe. But I would never be able to really curate a luxury stay there. You have the cars on I forget what it's called, on the cinder blocks, you've got that happening on lawns. So if it looks that way, if it looks a bit run down, you would not be able to isolate your property and say, okay, this is a luxury property, right? Because the entire space matters. So from a visual perspective, that's where it starts. If I'm looking to purchase my next home, I am looking at the whole neighborhood. If I'm looking at a Google Earth, I actually would walk the streets to see what's the surrounding, what does that look like before I even drive out to see it for myself. And so that really matters when you're looking to curate a luxury stay. But outside of that, when you enter into the home, I prefer something with, natural, solid stone countertops or a really nice butcher block, something like that, or stainless steel appliances, those types of things. Really, it really enhances the stay. It lets the guests know that you're serving them at a higher level, and the price point is going to be different on a nightly stay for sure.
All right, so let's talk about the price point, because you are able to achieve up to 15 times more in gross income than the traditional rental. So how are you able to do that? And can you give us an example?
Our second property was nearby also. I leveraged another one of those 10% down loans, second home loans. You can purchase multiple second homes utilizing a Fannie Mae product as long as the homes are different enough. And so this home was on 2 acres, and there was a body of water, like a little lake pond situation there. And so since it was in a different market, that's considered a different market to them, although just 3 miles away, I leveraged another second home loan, set up that property, needed some lipstick, paint, remove carpeting, hard flooring, about $30,000 of renovations, set it up, added it to the Airbnb platform to start. And since I was still working it out with which cleaning team I wanted to utilize and get them trained up, I just placed it on there for a minimum night stay of 30 nights. Usually I do a 2-night minimum, but I said for the first month, I'll do a minimum night stay of 30 nights as I get my team ramped up. I also utilize a tool, a dynamic pricing tool, which leverages an AI algorithm that looks at the hotel nightly rates, other short-term rental nightly rates, and it pushes the pricing on a day-to-day basis to my property. So if you look at my property, Monday is going to be different from Tuesday night. It's going to be different from Wednesday night. It depends on the occupancy in the area, whether or not there are events, whether or not there's a game or anything like that. And so this specific property, again, is in a suburban area in Georgia, beautiful neighborhood, a little bit higher cost of living. And the AI, though, I'm very familiar with it. You do have to train it. You give them your max, your min, those kinds of things, kind of massage it a little bit before it really takes effect and does a good job. Well, this property was being rented out as a long-term rental for $1,800 a month. That first 30 nights, the AI spat out the price, $28,000. And I laughed. I was like, oh, this thing is broken. Let me go ahead and I will turn it off and try to restart or reconnect it, because it takes a moment to do that setup.
It said $28,000 for the entire month for the whole 30 days?
Correct. Right. Which is preposterous, right? Because I'm a little girl from Haiti. And here's my assumption, Brian. I'm thinking, ooh, 1,800 long-term rental. Oh, I bet I can demand 6,000, for 30 nights, or 8,000 even. But dare I say 10,000? No. What kind of people, right? What kind of people who pay $10,000 for 30 nights? And before I could unplug it and turn it off, it got a booking. That month, it booked for 28,000. The next month, it booked for 15,000. The next month, it booked for 22,000, then 21,000, 18,000, and on and on and on.
You're doing 30-day or longer rentals then?
I planned on doing 2 nights. I still do 2 nights if there's gaps in between the rentals, but that one just kept getting booked by different sectors. And I even discovered a sector in the middle of it, which was...
What are those sectors? Who's your demographic that's paying $28,000 for the month?
28,000. So we're in Georgia. It's now called Yollywood, or the Hollywood of the South. This was an executive director of a movie that, of course, I cannot disclose under NDA for that. So a major movie series, who booked it for the first 30 nights. The next family that booked was actually a family that was displaced from their home that is nearby due to a fire. Then we've also hosted those that are displaced due to floods in their homes. So this whole sector is the insurance clients. So we're not paid by the guests. We're paid by, say, Allstate, State Farm, Progressive, Travelers Insurance. So their policy is to put these guests in a like type of home. And these are more affluent guests who have larger homes. So for instance, the mom says to me, imagine cooking for a family of 10 at a hotel. So they're in hotels for a few days, but they're looking for housing for them. And there are not many choices in certain neighborhoods. And so I'm really one of the only ones that has a home that's that size that would really fit an entire family of that size.
Are you doing that with all your properties then, in a way that you're able to get 20,000 or more per month? Or do you have other strategies that you're employing?
So I will tell you that our next property, we actually, at that point, I realized, man, I really like this, but I really need to figure out how to get more properties quickly. So I joined a mastermind, and then I partnered with someone and got a few properties in the Poconos area of Pennsylvania. And so in that area, during the peak seasons, we are able to demand that amount per month, 18,000, 28,000 per month, but we typically will do 3-night minimum rentals or 4-night minimum rentals. And it all adds up because, it's a drive-to market. You have guests coming from New York, Connecticut, New Jersey. And so if they're looking for that long weekend stay over the weekend, we're able to really demand that price. And during the weekdays, we can, create promo cycles and promotions to get them to stay a little bit longer. So what's great about the Poconos is you do have multiple peak seasons. You've got the spring, you've got the summer, you've got winter for skiing, you have lakes for fishing. So there's multiple seasons. There's only a couple of months where I can say it's really slow. And since these are larger homes, this gives us the time that we need to do our refresh, because you do have to refresh and deep clean, pressure wash, pool maintenance, get all of that, all the extra touches completed, but we are able to command the same. I have someone that I partner with as well in the Smokies of Tennessee. During the summer of last July, we generated on 2 properties, $56K on 2 properties during the summer. During the, slower season, we're able to make anywhere from, I'm going to say 8 to 11,000 per month. Sometimes we get up to 20,000, but it more than covers the overhead. And during the summers, we really are able to generate those higher numbers as well.
Rachel, you mentioned the AI that you're using with the algorithm to help you price. What is that? Can you give us the name?
Product is actually called Price Labs. So pricelabs.co is the product that I use. Yeah, and that's called a dynamic pricing tool. There are a couple of others out there. The one that I use is not doesn't have the prettiest interface or the most user-friendly, but it gets the job done. I'm not changing a thing.
What else can you tell us that differentiates these luxury higher end vacation rentals? Like, how many bedrooms does it have to have? Is there anything particular about the location? I know you went into that in some detail, but is there anything else? Give our listeners that final checklist that they should be looking for if they want to do what you're doing.
So what I love about catering to larger multi-generational multi-families, traveling with children and teens, is that that's who I am. That's my avatar. So when I'm traveling, I like to bring my mom and dad, my husband's siblings and their spouses, my siblings, their spouses, their children, my children. So when you think of that whole dynamic, Brian, what you see here is we have probably 4 or 5 paying adult units. And so if I'm going to demand anywhere from $900 to $2,800 per night on a property, for someone like me, again, little girl from Haiti, I would think to myself, that's insane. But if I'm going to be splitting that risk between 4 or 5 other family units, it's not so bad. And then you're thinking of, a space where you're not necessarily in a hotel. I'm not digging hotels or anything like that, but you have a little bit more elbow room, a full kitchen. You have a backyard oftentimes. Some of the properties, it depends on the market, has a hot tub. Some have pools, some have both, some have neither, but a large yard where you can play cornhole in the back. And so these properties are typically 5 to 8 bedrooms are that's my bread and butter, 5 to 8 bedrooms. I love that because I know that I'm going to be catering specifically to those traveling with multi-generational families. And so knowing that they can split that risk, I've gone all in and I'm focused primarily on them. And I know in the short-term rental world, we have those who cater on traveling nurses and those who cater on just different avatars, but that's the avatar that I choose to cater to. Although we do sometimes get an affluent family who is mom and dad and one child and a nanny who will rent out an 8-bedroom. I don't know why, but they do sometimes. Or you'll have a girls, bachelorette party with all the rules, we'll let them know you cannot trash this place and we'll collect their deposit. But you do have other avatars that will migrate to these properties because either they can, they're okay with paying that price, or they're in a situation where they're splitting that risk amongst multiple paying adults. So 5 to 8 bedrooms is my bread and butter. And of course, if anyone's looking to get started, always look at the regulations. You want to make sure that you're following up on the regulations to know what's going on there as well.
Rachel, how would someone find out more about you or get a hold of you?
Absolutely. And I do have a free gift, Brian, for your audience. So a question that I get asked all the time is, well, Dr. Rachel, where should I invest? And so what I want to share with your audience is my top 75 US cities with the highest profitability. And you would just go to 75gems.com. That is 75, the number 7, the number 5, GEMS.com. And you'll get that free gift. And there'll be links on how to follow up with me if you want to learn more.
Rachel, it's been a real pleasure talking with you. You shared some great insight into doing luxury vacation rentals and how you're managing to 15x your profit on those. Thank you so much for having this conversation with us today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com.
And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.